The peanut gallery.
Did I say that? I didn't send that in a text. I'm sorry.
We're live.
Oh, it never ends year round. Yeah, competitive swim is every week. Every once in a while they get a break, so they have a break.
The school team.
That's in the spring. You get a week off next week, but mostly it's short course, so like yards, but then there's also long courses. Super strong athletes. They swim for hours every day year round. I was thinking it was me. I really think I was having some technical difficulties, but
I've learned it's usually not Jessica. When I'm in similar situations, it's usually not Jessica.
thank you for the compliment.
It's true.
Who have not played at all, some who have played pretty good.
I've got 5:30, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand for a moment of silence in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Recorder, if you'd call the roll.
Chairman Floyd,
Present.
Vice Chair Harrison, Deborah Thomas, Jeremy Burnett, Michelle Childs, here, Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
We have a quorum. Mr. Superintendent, would you lead us through our agenda?
We have 3 items on tonight's special called agenda. The first item is discussion action on option agreement between Dennis J. Demo Revocable Living Trust and the Board of Education for the Lakeland School System.
I'd like to point out that this is a special called meeting, so we're limiting our discussion to items that were published on the agenda. Having said that, is there a motion to get the first item on the floor?
Move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, would you like to speak to this?
I would. I want to give some setup that kind of encompasses really all 3 of the agenda items today, but is certainly relevant to the first one. Just to remind the board and the public, in November of 2017, so nearly 4 years ago, the request was made to this board to approve $1 million in fund balance for the purchase, identification and purchase of a site that would be suitable for what we believe to be Lakeland School System's next school, which would be some sort of elementary school. And since then, we've had conversations about what kind of grade band that may look like, and have contemplated, rather than split grade levels off into different schools, we may have a model something like perhaps a K through 2 school, and then perhaps a 3-5 or even a 3-6. You could kind of play with the numbers either way. Since that time, and I want to recognize Dr. Jim Mitchell, who is here tonight and is with me just about any time that I'm dealing with capital projects or construction issues. For the last 5 years, very regularly and persistently, we have been doing just that. We've been evaluating pieces of land and trying to determine suitability and trying to determine if there was an appropriate deal, I suppose, that could be made with the landowners. During that time, and off the top of my head, I can think of at least 5 pieces of land prior to this, at least, where we have been serious enough to sit down with an owner, sit down with a developer, in just about all of those cases, do some due diligence with typically Renaissance Group, our architect, try to figure out if the site would be appropriate. And what we've learned is that a couple of things. Land is in short supply in Lakeland in terms of land that is appropriate for a development, in terms of having utilities that would make it feasible to build a school there, and that there are a number of circumstances, some involving the desires of the developer or the surrounding neighborhoods, some involving just the suitability of the property itself, that are reason that it has taken 4 years. It's ironic, probably, that we find ourselves now talking about the possibility of 2 pieces of land, but I will start with the first item on the agenda, which is an option agreement between the Dennis J. Demo Revocable Living Trust and the Board of Education for the Lakeland School System. We're actually going in reverse order here. This is the one that came up the most recently, and this was based on some conversations with neighbors, essentially, neighbors of the athletic annex, and who happen to live. This property is adjacent to the Lakeland Prep site and is on Old Brownsville Road, and it is actually 2 parcels of land, and one of them has a home on the land itself. So when we looked at this as a possibility, and let me say, Dr. Mitchell and I for some time have said, ideally, we would find 2 pieces of land. We need an immediate I'm sorry, I shouldn't say immediate. We need an elementary school here in the near term, and we've been settling lately that that's probably within the next 5 years, that we're going to need another elementary school due to the growth in Lakeland and at Lakeland Elementary School. And then we have always said that the Lakeland Prep master plan, long term, was that it be built so that when growth demanded it, you could easily flip the switch where it was a comprehensive standalone high school, and then at that time, a new middle school would be built. Now, I do want to point out, I don't believe that is imminent. I believe the size and the scope of the Lakeland Prep project is going to serve middle and high schools in some configuration for a long time. I think, and I probably ought to be careful with this, I really do think it might be 15 years before we get to the point where we say, and I think that may be a worst-case scenario, where we say that the Lakeland Prep site can only accommodate 4 grade levels. I don't think we'll be there for some time, and I want to be really clear about that. But I also know, one of the things the school board has said, and one of the things that I've said, we've got to be thinking that far down the road. We've got to be thinking 15, 20 years, because if we wait until when we need that middle school, we may just be built out, or we may be putting ourselves in the position where to make it happen would require a really significant investment in infrastructure that might not be there. So again, kind of going in reverse order, that would be the idea for this first piece of property. And I want to talk a little bit about the house as well. I think probably, if we had our druthers, we wouldn't be purchasing a house. We'd just buy the land, and we would keep the land until it was necessary. However, there are a lot of things about the parcel of land that has the house that could potentially be advantageous. For one, again, it is adjacent to the Lakeland Prep site, so it gives us some opportunities for expansion of buildings. It potentially gives us some opportunities for detention, for example, water detention from the neighboring site where the...
Clarify, you're not talking about students' detention.
I'm not talking about student detention. That's a... Thank you. I'm very interested in that, but in this case, I am talking about water. So just having that parcel itself would be extremely helpful. But then you've got a house, and we have discussed publicly the situation where we essentially are taking up more offices, I think, than anybody ever envisioned the school system taking up in City Hall. We have a city that's growing. We have a City Hall staff that is growing, I believe, appropriately to provide the services that the citizens of Lakeland want, and they have been nothing but gracious hosts, and I want to say that. When I started as the superintendent, the thought was, is there an office that the superintendent could use? And we now have 5. And 3 of those offices have 2 people each, and they were designed for 1 person each. So we're kind of tight in there, and it's certainly not giving the city a lot of options. So what brings me back to the house? Dr. Mitchell and I, along with the architects from Renaissance, did walk through the house. We feel like it is very feasible that the house could be converted into a small central office space. I think we would still have to have meetings here. There's not enough room for a meeting space, but certainly enough room to take the pressure off City Hall and move, I think anywhere from, depending on how you counted it, 8 to possibly 12 people there. If you finished, there's an unfinished second story there. Again, so there are some options. Having the house on the property does make the overall cost of that purchase more expensive than it would be otherwise, because I think it's fair to say right now, houses in Lakeland are getting a pretty good amount of interest in terms of in sales of those houses. So long story short, that piece of property, according to this option agreement, would be $933,250 for a total of 25 acres, including the home that is on the property. And again, I think if both of these pieces went through, that would likely be land that sat there for quite some time, depending on the desires of the board and the ability to do something. I do want to discuss just a little bit. The option agreement essentially means that for a $15,000 non-refundable essentially option fee, that we would be purchasing the option to buy that property. We would then have 60 days to do some more due diligence on the property. That would be a level 1 environmental, probably a wetlands study, and then probably most importantly some soil borings on the property to make sure that there was suitable soil and that we could do what we wanted to do on the property. And what we're picturing again in the long term would be a 1-story middle school building that would accommodate the needs of a middle school at that time. I do want to just make sure we're all on the same page. If really for both of these contracts, if the board approves both of these contracts tonight, that would essentially give the administration, myself, the green light to move forward with closing on these pieces of land in the absence of any issues. So that due diligence period gives us some time to say, this is not going to work for us, and we would still have that option on both of these. If we find anything at all, in fact, that made us think this isn't looking like a good idea anymore, then we would have the ability as the administration to say, there's not a deal for this property.
Thank you, Dr. Horrell. At this time, I will open it up for discussion. It's from the board, or questions or concerns. Thomas.
No, one piece of property that we looked at beforehand, we were gonna kinda have to figure out how to make it work because it wasn't quite the size that it needed to be, and we had maybe explored making it 2 levels, but with this piece of property, you feel like it's more accommodating for kind of a regularly appropriated school building, right?
We do, and actually, I'm going to ask Dr. Mitchell if that's okay to get up and maybe comment just on his.
We always love to hear from Dr.
thoughts.
Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, please share with us your thoughts on this site and the opportunity that exists with it.
Since we're properly socially distanced, I'm going to take this off, if that's okay with you.
Perfectly fine.
All right. Well, it's a great question that you've asked, and yes, we did look at some property that just didn't yield the number of acres that you really need to build a single-story school building for the numbers of students that we expect will be coming to Lakeland. These 2 sites would permit you traditional one-story building for elementary or middle school. So yes, that's a good question, and that's part of why 1 or 2 of the other sites just didn't work out. We could not negotiate to purchase enough acreage.
Dr. Mitchell, since you're up, do you have any comments on the site itself and the opportunity to purchase land now versus perhaps passing on this and waiting to see what comes up next? I know you have lived in this world for a long time, and we value your opinion and expertise.
I appreciate that, and let me just say it's been a pleasure and continues to be a pleasure to work with your superintendent and you all as a board. And yes, we were in a meeting earlier today, and my memory bank, which sometimes it's hard to make a withdrawal from that. Yes, I have been involved with the construction of more than 22 new schools. That involved buying property, evaluating property for those schools all over this county, from north to south and east to west in the legacy county schools. There's no piece of property that's perfect, no. But Dr. Harlan and I have gotten our boots on, and we walked these sites, looking at them carefully. And at this point, I do believe that both of these have the potential to be sites that could be developed for future schools that Lakeland will need. The beginning of a due diligence period, nothing will show up. Based on looking at the plat, walking the land, walking the house, meeting with the architects, knowing what we know about school design and construction, these 2 sites merit strong consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Any questions from Mr. Burnett?
Either for Dr. Mitchell or Dr. Horrell, and I know we talked briefly about the house. Was there a dollar amount that we had talked about that might best in making that house into a set of offices?
We talked very kind of roughly, and I believe Dr. Mitchell's not given his memory enough credit, by the way.
I know that
we
to
know
be
that
true.
it's much better than mine. I believe what the architect said. If you really wanted to blow it out and do it right, and renovate the second story that's unfinished, we'd probably be talking potentially between $150,000 and $200,000. Was that your recollection?
The total renovation and expanded to all of the space that could be built on in the house. But you would not have to do that in order to start using it. It's desired to use it as a central office. There are rooms available now that vehicles could be placed in. Excellent storage in 2 different garages that are out there. It could cost that much, Dr. Hall's correct, but I don't think you'd be faced with that expense on the front end, depending on just how many people you want to house in there.
Right. We're thinking if you just, took the carpet out and put down more appropriate flooring and painted the inside, you could really, assuming you got the internet and phone situation the way you needed it, you could pretty easily make that transition to at least get started.
Looked at the air conditioning, heating systems in there. It's hot. Half of the air conditioning and heating's been replaced within the last 3 years. Other unit, a little older, but that's always a major expense. The roof has been replaced fairly recently. It's not a major issue either. There's some plumbing problem that we didn't check out. I think that you could pretty quickly make it a central office location.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Any other comments or questions about Ms. Childs?
I just had a comment. I think it's just amazing that we actually have the opportunity to purchase land adjacent to our current property, because if one day, we do put a middle school there, then those students would still be able to enjoy all of the athletics that we're spending all this money on this year to put in. So I'm just super excited. And if by chance, hopefully not, the other property we discover something, we'll at least own one if we can't find another, if this one doesn't work out or we can't find an elementary property. But
Right. It's a unique opportunity to acquire a piece of land adjacent to the land you already own. Give Dr. Hall credit for that. It was his relationships with the neighbors informed about what was happening around the school. Led some of the information that said it was not even on the market. The relationships.
Dr. Horrell?
Yeah, I did want to add, Josh Lawhead from Birch, Porter, and Johnson he's got a real estate specialty, and he's who we work with directly, along with Mr. Plumley, kind of in a more general sense. He is the primary author of both these contracts. He could not be here with us tonight. This was a special call meeting on short notice. It just happens that we got both of these in a format where the board could act at the same time. But he obviously has signed off on these and believes that these are in the proper form for execution by the school board. And I do want to thank Josh Lawhead, because he worked extremely hard on both of these and able to pivot and be creative, and is I think helped a lot in terms of getting them before the board.
Information. Thank you, Dr. Horrell. Any other comments or discussion on this item? I would ask Dr. Horrell, do you, if we don't think we're going to use this property, let's say for 15 years, do you think it could be used for other purposes during that period to benefit the school system besides a central office?
No, the short answer is yes. I mean, I think they're depending on how you look at the investment and the amount you put towards an investment on part of the property, if it might be used later for something else. But it would. Ms. Child said it. It's land that's adjacent to our school. I mean, you could put up, certainly, I think at a minimum, some sort of trail system that went over there. I think potentially there are athletic facilities that could be put there. I also think if the house itself wasn't suitable for a long-term central office as we continue to grow, you could start over if you wanted to. That happens sometimes. You could. There's certainly, it's situated well where that could be the site of a new, standalone central office if that was the direction that the board was willing to go. So I do believe that. I think there are a number of possibilities. It is adjacent both to the athletic fields and to the primary site. Kind of the land itself straddles those two.
Good. Any other comments, questions, or discussion on this item? Ms. Childs?
So to clarify, you're saying if the desire was there would be enough space if you were to long-term have a larger central office and have a middle school building?
I believe so. Would you? There may be. We'd have to look, I think, real specifically at kind of the floodplain there and what the situation was there. Dr. Mitchell?
I I don't want to say that you could build other things on there now. I think your question was if you don't need it. We're not in a floodplain. And that's, at least, the lower area is. Now, we've walked the land, and the land where the school would go is on the high ground. And that's always important. But the house itself is the lower part of the property. The area where the school would be built is on the higher part of the property. So all of those things would have to be looked at within the due diligence. So I wouldn't want to make a 100% statement. The other site that you're looking at tonight, too, has potential for not only a school, but a central office, too. So you've got two unique pieces of property to consider.
If we needed extra practice fields or something like that, Dr. Horrell, you're comfortable that we could make it work there if we needed to?
Probably comfortable may be a stretch, but I think it certainly, depending on what they were, I think you could take a look at the property and see what kinds of things would go there appropriately, yeah.
And I realize we haven't even done due diligence, but as we talk about the layout of the land and the relationship to the current campus, because that's really all we can talk about tonight, because we don't have enough, we haven't done due diligence yet, so we don't know what it can or can't be. But as it relates to layout of land and relationship to the campus, those things seem possible.
It would seem to me that things like small practice fields,
Right.
there are
Right.
groups that don't need a lot of room. There's some flat land behind where the house is. Of course, with this new 5-field facility, it's
I
hard to
understand.
think we're going to be hurting
Right.
for that in the short term. But I do think potentially it's more property and that gives you options, and we can evaluate it and see if that's an appropriate place. But yeah.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, the option agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The option agreement is approved. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on agreement of purchase and sale between Renaissance Land Investments, LLC, and the Board of Education for the Lakeland School System.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Let me note again that this is the one that we actually started with and have been working on the longest. And I also want to note, because it comes up, Renaissance Land Investments is not linked in any way to Renaissance Group, who is the architecture firm that we work with frequently. Renaissance Land Investments is owned by Doug Swink, who we're familiar with, and who we worked with on the purchase of. He was also on the other side of the negotiation on the Jones property land acquisition. Mr. Swink and Renaissance Land Investments has an approved planned development called the Meadows, and this is on the opposite side of US 70 from City Hall, and it is to the east of where new Seed Tick Road would be extended. If you picture Seed Tick Road coming out, and there's a planned extension of that called new Seed Tick. So it would be a piece of land to the east of that on the north side of US 70. This is 23 acres, and Mr. Swink actually has an option agreement with the landowners there, which is the Olds family. And what this purchase and sale contemplates is, during our due diligence period, which I will say is much shorter on this one, but I'll also say that we've been kind of looking at the land longer and probably know more about the land on this one. This contemplates that we would then have the option to exercise an option on Mr. Swink's option. So this would all happen almost simultaneously, and it's similar to the previous one. If the board approves this purchase and sale agreement tonight, that if everything goes the way we hope it goes, then we would move forward with the closing without further board action. However, we would have the option, if we find things for any reason that makes us think this is not, again, what we thought it would be, or it's not a suitable site, we could decide to not purchase the property there. It is 23 acres. There is no home on this. It's just acreage, and that is for $644,280. I will say one of the things that's very different about this site than the other is that it has largely been cleared. So when we went to take a walk out there, you can see you're not walking through the woods. I mean, it's very easy to picture a school site there. There would be some investment into the extension of new Seed Tick Road that we're factoring into there. We would be responsible for a portion of that cost, not the entirety of the cost, but a portion of that cost. But this is the one we started with, and it is also a very exciting opportunity. And again, we walk the site as we do, and I feel like it would be a good central location for what I believe for this site would be the next school that Lakeland School System builds, which would be an elementary or intermediate school.
That introduction, Dr. Horrell, any comments or questions or discussion on this item?
We couldn't rename Seed Tick Road. I'm just kidding. New Seed Tick Road. So this one is, you said it was quick, so it's August the 20th?
August 15th is actually,
August 15th.
And unfortunately, Mr. Swink has some built-in timetables by which he's got to notify the landowner.
If we were to approve tonight, no other action is required of the board. It would just move forward with due diligence, and we've made the agreement. Everything turns out, then we do the transfer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Childs.
About how far away is this from LES? Close.
What would you say, about a mile and a half? A mile? Between a mile and a half, yeah.
That would be very convenient for elementary parents to have that school not only centrally located, but close, both elementary schools to be close.
And I know I don't have to say this, but kind of what we're setting ourselves up for is more, whereas some, school systems will have schools all over, so they're convenient to different neighborhoods. This is more of a centralized kind of almost, wagon wheel idea that wherever you live, you come towards Central Lakeland, and I believe possibly conveniently drop students off at multiple schools. Again, with the idea being, at least the vision now from our conversations, is that we keep all the students in a grade level and grade band together. So I do think, that maybe the disadvantage of that is you're switching schools more often. The advantage is that there is, one school or grade band, and all the students are in it, and they're all kind of in this central Lakeland, location. This is really, if you look at these sites, I mean, it's the heart of Lakeland, right there.
But also allow you to, kind of like we have now when the first high school group comes, we can have certified to teach at both grade bands, and you can easily split them between the two grade levels. I mean, it gives you a whole lot of freedom when it comes to personnel.
It does. Personnel, transportation. There are a number of systems that have students from multiple grade bands get on the same bus, and the bus makes 2 stops, within 15 minutes of each other. You could easily see that being a situation. Same thing with, the parents themselves. Instead of there being an hour between, maybe it's just 15 minutes, and you roll through one, and then you roll through the next, and then you go on your way.
Comments or discussion on this item? Dr. Horrell, I would like to ask you what's appealing about this site as it relates to a second elementary school.
Me, what's appealing about it is many things we've said already. I think the proximity to the Lakeland Elementary and to Lakeland Preparatory School. I mean, it's kind of right there. It kind of creates this triangle of schools there. I do think we've got the opportunity to having it off of US 70 is advantageous. The fact that there's a road plan, for new Seed Tick, I believe is also advantageous. It gives us the opportunity to have 2 entrances, perhaps. I believe with the Meadows subdivision, at least the way it's planned, it's got the opportunity to be a neighborhood school for that neighborhood as well. So a number of students like we see at Lakeland Elementary who might have the possibility of, being able to walk there or ride their bikes there, like I know so many families enjoy about Lakeland Elementary. again, I think the fact that it was already cleared, potentially save some development costs there. Dr. Mitchell?
Sewer and power are good, I presume, and
I'll yield to Dr. Mitchell on that. He's
My question, Chairman Floyd. Yes, sewer is available. It's available on Highway 70. Water, we're going to have to check due diligence, and natural gas, but we're pretty confident it's there. I see this property very similar to the way we bought the land for your current Lakeland Elementary School. That was 22 years ago. I know time just rolls on by, doesn't it? We would not have chosen that property if there had not been a good plan for a residential subdivision around it. The value of that, both for the residents and for the school. Something similar here with this piece of property adjacent to the meadows. As to the west of this, you have the Heath Field on Scotts Creek. Also it's been approved and it's going to be a residential expansion. You have residential neighborhoods. And so this property, some years from now, would be seen similar to your elementary school, that it's an anchor subdivision. Advantages. Also, a pretty high piece of ground. It has its benefits, and let me just say one other thing, not trying to too many decisions by this board, but because this was such a short turnaround time, I already asked the architects to lay out a potential building footprint on this site, and so that soil borings could be done quickly. Doesn't bore anywhere. We need to know, where do you want us to bore? Well, that work's already been done, assuming that the board approves this tonight. No contracts have been signed for that.
Well, and and the board did approve the access agreement to that site previously, so they went into that kind of eyes wide open.
Well, the things have already been put in place should the board choose to approve this option agreement contingency contract tonight. It is a quick turnaround.
Yeah, a question for you. So, do you anticipate there'll be plenty, just the way that the school might be on there and the way that the subdivision's looking that it's going to happen, do you anticipate there'll be plenty of space for a car rider line?
Preliminary layout that the architects have done, in that consideration, traffic would mainly come in off of the new C-Tick Road, but into a pretty long area that would be available. That's important. It's almost impossible to provide enough space for everybody's car, but that's going to be given good consideration as the design moves forward.
I appreciate that, because when you talk to any parent at particular other schools in this county, the first thing they will tell you about that school, if there's not a good car rider situation, is that very thing. You know, so.
What we have found over the years is that 5 years ago, we rode buses. People that were dropping kids off in cars. Adequate 25 years ago, it may not be, because there are more people dropping children off because of so many of the opportunities you have before school, after school activities that bus may not get you there. So we understand. So yes, that's a really good question, and I know it's something your superintendent has already asked too.
And we have schools around here where the middle and the elementary are together, so it's not unheard of to have this sort of situation. But where I lived, I know we had a high school and an elementary and a middle, and it provides a lot of opportunities for the kids too, the older kids to mentor the younger ones, to come in to read with the younger students. With whatever CTE opportunities we have, you never know how that'll connect all the kids. And I have these visions of how the seniors do the senior walk through LES. You know, you're right there to do it, and the kids know you and they know each other. It's a real community. I see a real, bonding opportunity there among the grade levels.
And I'll also note something Dr. Mitchell pointed out, the way this land is laid out, there is a parcel of the land that would be really on US 70 that, again, would just give us another option. The school site probably, the school itself, rather, probably wouldn't stretch down that far. It's a piece of it that comes with it. But when you look at the site, you can almost picture, again, potentially, a central office there that was off US 70, like City Hall is off US 70 here, just on the other side of the street, with the school building back behind it, which is similar to what Germantown School District did with Forest Hill Elementary. They took advantage of that property and built their central office space on the same, essentially, property with that new elementary school.
And I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Horrell, because you've kept us abreast all along about the complexity. There are three entities involved: Lakeland School System, a private owner, as well as this developer. And so I just wanted to say thank you. It seems like a short turnaround from the time we're having this meeting. I mean, I think you've kept this for 2 months at least?
At least 2 months, yeah, that's what I would have said, I think. Welcome, thank you. It's a pleasure.
More.
Thomas.
Sorry. So the fact that we would have 3 schools right there, would the opportunity for an outdoor classroom space that all the schools could share could be part of that plan? Is there enough land, some sort of billion or something where you could do an outdoor thing?
This one's a little further. I don't know that it's going to be as convenient as far as, walking between the two school sites. Potentially, certainly with maybe the future middle and the high school, I think that would be easy, yeah.
Childs.
Sounds to me like if both of these end up working out and completely closing, that it will be very exciting to see master plan opportunities for, the school system.
I think that's certainly true. We would essentially, be adding, if both of these things come to pass, we'd be adding 48 acres.
Thing that we haven't touched on, but is important, financial implications as it relates to our reserves. We've approved an option agreement for
On 33,250,
33,250. This is another.
it's 44,280.
We'd be paying these out of reserves. Is that correct, Dr. Morrow?
It is. So the budget amendment on item 3 is we round up a little bit to cover some of these due diligence costs, but it would be for 1.6 million. So the board had budgeted 1 million for the one piece of property. We would be paying 1.6 million for the 2 pieces of property. Yes, so that would be paid out of the fund balance.
But do you happen to know our current fund balance as it sits today?
I can get there. Right. Last year's ending general fund balance. Now, this actually doesn't include this year we just ended. Okay, that was almost exactly $7 million. We do expect to add some more of that. We've already budgeted to use $2 million of that for the construction of LPS, and then we had $1 million again of that for this land purchase. So that would leave around $5 million, and then we'd be taking another $600,000 out of that. So it's not insubstantial, for sure.
Let's just say, being conservative, we would have a fund balance of around $4 million plus after we do this.
Yes.
Does that provide? Are you comfortable with that balance?
Hey, listen, our fund balance was $0 when we started this, so
I remember.
I know you do. Yes, that's within guideline for what a fund balance should be. That does not include whatever fund balance was added from the 2021 year. I will say, just to so we're real clear, I do think that changes the calculus on conversations that we had about the potential of building a freestanding central office in the short term somewhere else. So I think you'd have to look at that differently, because also coming out of that fund balance in the near term will be the extension of Campus Drive to US 70, which will likely be, potentially another $2 million. But even all that being said, I'm very comfortable. I do feel like, or I wouldn't recommend it, even though it's two pieces of property and not one, and it's $1.6 million and not one. Again, I think for that long-term vision, for that 15, 20, 25-year vision for Lakeland school system, I think this is the right thing to do for the school system, and I think future school boards and superintendents will be glad that we made that investment at this time.
There's not anything preventing us from selling it down the road, us or the future school boards or systems, if they decide that it's no longer needed.
That's a good point. I think, as far as a real estate investment, I think it would work out from that perspective.
Essentially changing one asset for another at that point.
Right.
Any other comments or questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the purchase and sale agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Purchase and sale agreement is approved. Next item.
Next and final item is discussion action on FY 21-22 budget amendment.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
Move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell.
We've kind of laid this out. This is essentially a budget amendment for that creates a total of $1.6 million in capital funding available for the purchase of the land and some of the due diligence involved in that.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the budget amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Dr. Horrell, is there any other business that needs to come before the board?
There's no further business this evening. I'm sorry, Dr. Mitchell? Absolutely. If the chair.
We always, Dr. Mitchell, your comments are always welcome.
I won't take much time because I know it's dinner time, but listening to what you've done tonight and watching what you've done over the years really, really brings on a deal of admiration for what you've accomplished. It was in 2012 that it's about creating municipal school districts. Who asked the question, oh yeah, well, we think that some of the other places can do that, but Lakeland can't do it because it's only got one school. The company was convinced that Lakeland could do this. Well, I just would suggest to you that actions that you've taken tonight, really the kinds of actions, the forward-thinking work that you'd like to see a school board and superintendent do. Me, for schools, as your superintendent knows and you know, is not easy to find down anywhere. The work that you've done is really, really wonderful. And you, city leaders in Lakeland, faculty and the staff, the parents, the students, the community, for supporting what you've done. The last thing I would just say is this. One of the things we talked about that took it to heart, and you as a board have taken it to heart, is that conservative financial management puts you in a position to be able to do what you're doing today. Add to your fund balance again this year, I'm sure. Able to do this and to do it out of fund balance with a school district that is young, a testament to the leadership that you've displayed. So I commend you, I congratulate you to see what you've accomplished, and also proud to be a citizen of Lakeland.
Dr. Mitchell, you've obviously been an integral part of our process as well, so we thank you for your service and willingness to serve. Any other announcements or comments?
I'll add to that. A thank you to those who have sat in these chairs before we got here, because it's been a long road, and sometimes it's been contentious, and we've always had our eyes on what's best for our kids, what's best for our families and our community. So thank you, and thank everyone who's been part of this since the early days. Any
other comments or announcements? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.